people were willing to look at the internet again. And brought in my first investor, and that was Goldman Sachs Principal Strategies. GSPS was the black box of Goldman. This is 2004, and then into 5. You know, now the internet was back. Because the interesting thing is, internet usage had never slowed down. You know, the fundamentals were all still showing you continued growth and traction. Remember, price is the primary barometer of sentiment. Using price as a data point for markets and their potential and performances, you know, it's more of an emotional thing probably than anything else. Because the internet was continuing, you know, usage was clearly up and to the right. It's not like when all the internet companies went bankrupt. And actually, Mary Meeker, because this is a markets conversation, I know hearing me say Mary Meeker on a stage. One of the best strategies at the time was, you know, in the internet bubble having been burst, the public companies that hadn't gone under, you know, like eBay, were profitable and trading below cash. One of the best investment strategies of all time was, in that decimated market, was to buy internet companies that were profitable because they were trading below cash on the balance sheet. One of the best performance fund, you know, investment strategies ever, which I think is, you know, always, you know, kind of relevant. You know, if you're here, hopefully you're a bit of a contrarian, you're a bit of a free thinker. You know, you actually take the time to hopefully be informed so that you can make informed decisions for yourself. I used to draw charts and show people how money gets made, you know, and you basically have good ideas and bad ideas. The bad ideas obviously don't work out. But amongst the good ideas, you've got consensus and contrarian. If it was a good idea that works and everyone agrees, there's not a whole lot of money to be made. You know, the trick, the key is identifying things that not everyone agrees on yet. You know, that's where the outsized, you know, the big returns come in. You know, and hopefully there's, you know, some of those ideas here, you know, present in the room. Whether it be, you know, the baby that was thrown out with the bathwater and crypto projects, you know, in the bear market, you know, as we're back in a bull-ish market, and what very well could be a bull market with the ETFs coming online. I mean, the fact that in the election cycle of this year, you've probably seen Trump made his big announcement that he's against central bank digital currencies, you know, which came from Vivek. You've seen RFK Jr., you know, coming out and being against a central bank digital currency. We haven't seen the perspective of the Democrats yet on this issue, but if I were President Biden, I'd probably take a similar position, because really the only two groups that seem to support that would be Gary Gensler and the SEC, and probably a handful of people at Treasury and the Fed. And so the fact that it's going to be part of our political season, which, by the way, having come from entertainment, the fact that we're getting a rerun. It's 2024 and we're getting 2020 reruns. Like, I don't know about you, but I like fresh content. But reruns it is, okay. It'd be thoroughly entertaining. Yeah, where's the writer's strike, you know? But that's where the important lies, right? The future is going to happen to you, or it's going to happen with you. I can't stress enough, you know, the importance of your civic participation. Right? If you don't show up, someone else is going to make decisions for you. And they may not be in your best interest. You can go back and take a look at a TEDx talk that I did, I think it was last year. You know, it was talking about kind of Web 1. To tie it all together, Web 1 was when we had this philosophical view that the internet was going to democratize information. You know, make information available to everyone. Making access to information equal to everyone, and with that, the opportunities that come from the knowledge that's available to you. You know, Web 2 is kind of like big tech, kind of capturing all the value and creating all the funnels, all roads lead to. And Web 3, which hopefully some of you are paying attention to. I mean, I can at least speak to it from my perspective. Web 3 is about the demonopolization of Web 2. Right? One where we're fixing some of the things that went wrong, and call it the value capture, to try and bring it back to its next sort of phase, which I would argue is your participation, right? I mean, if you look at history, right, history is that, gold was the most precious commodity in the world, right? Then it became black gold or oil. There was actually, to bring it close to home, sugarcane for a little while. Just to give a little bit of a lesson, in Puerto Rico, it became part of the United States as a territory at the end of the Spanish-American War in 1898. And the first governor that came here served for 1 year, appointed by the then President of the United States, went back and started Domino Sugar, and came back and tore up, call it the agriculture here to plant sugar, because that was the gold of its time. I usually leave that one out, because in the macro scale of time, it's not a big one. But it was one that impacted the resiliency and food security here. That didn't get fixed. But anyway, to move to the current most precious commodity there is, it's your data. The most precious commodity in the world is your data. It's your digital DNA, it's your information. Most of the time you don't know where that information is, who's using it, for what and why, and how it's being monetized. And that's one of the things that Web 3 is focusing on, is how do you create a world that's more equitable? We talk about things like we talk about universal basic income. If everyone was participating and being remunerated for value that they're creating through their use and living, and getting some of that back, obviously it would be relevant to the value of that market. Some people might be getting $1 a month. Some people might be getting a lot more than that, depending upon the value of markets and what markets are willing to pay for that information. But if we talk about kind of global universal basic income, this is one of the areas from which it may arise, in this sort of Web 3 environment of participation and remuneration for your contributions, which I think is an interesting thing to focus on. Clearly, we're seeing this with stable coins. I was one of the founders of Tether, which was the first of them, and that's where the central bank sort of digital currency concept is coming from. And it's not a terrible idea, right? Just the question is, how does it emerge? In the case of Tether, you have a private company that has effectively digitized the dollar, with $90 billion held in custody, typically in banks, with $50 trillion a year in sort of transactional volume right now. These are meaningful numbers. One thing that people tend not to know about why it's so popular is ultimately in global trade. It's because of settlement, speed of settlement. Right? Most people, if time is money, they don't want T+3 or 3 days to settle. If transactions can be settled, call it T0, that allows money to move and more trade to be conducted. And so I don't know what the current numbers are, but I'd estimate that probably 10 trillion of that right now is in that area. And so clearly governments are looking at this. It'll be part of the political topic here. You may know that the Chinese government has created the Chinese digital yuan. You have a number of governments around the world looking at central bank digital currencies. But what does that mean for us? The reason why you've been hearing politically about this and why it's being challenged is, what does that mean for banks? What does that mean for privacy? And so this is where that's a topic, not something we need to dive or double click on here. But it's kind of important stuff. We're living in that fourth industrial revolution. So Web 3, demonopolization of sort of Web 2. And I think the big thing there is your participation and how you benefit from it. Other sort of global things that are going on. I mean, wow, life is better than it's ever been. Today, life is better than it's ever been. And it's going to get better if we make it better, right? Because life, we're also more challenged than we've ever been. I landed this morning, I was over back in Poland. I was in Auschwitz and Krakow. Elon Musk gave a speech yesterday, and so I was part of the US delegation, and it's like, as amazing as life is right now, there are still some very real challenges, whether it be conflicts in Russia and Ukraine, Palestine and Israel, and there's still starvation in the world. There's still a lot to do, which is the reason for being involved and engaged. Because there's, as great as life is today, there's still tremendous room for improvement, and I think there's no better time to be alive. The challenge is as great as it's ever been. The stakes are as high as they've ever been, and the opportunity to make an impact, because we have innovation. We were able to experiment with economic ideas, which is why so many economists would come to work in our offices to get tenured in the university, because if we messed up and destroyed the world, it affected maybe 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 gamers in a metaverse. There's not a lot of, I'd say, experimentation, but that's what we did in these gaming worlds. Thousands of metaverses. I mentioned Goldman Sachs. I was their first private investment. I think I was basically managing markets for 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 virtual countries effectively at the time. But they're virtual worlds. They're in your World of Warcraft, your Second Lives, your Lineages, your Dark Age of Camelot. By the way, anybody ever play massively multiplayer games? Any gamers in the room? Okay, not that many. But we made all the markets basically for pretty much every one of these things. We had most of, call it the West, South Korea. Actually, South Korea, because that was the mecca of online games. I had, I think, 40% of the population as my customers. It's like, gaming is like core to life. We did esports. I started a television channel in China and was all over the esports sort of stuff. But it was obviously the precursor to cryptocurrency for me and for a lot. It was actually the main driver of new users when call it crypto went through its expansion phase. Because it was a big learning curve for people to understand how an intangible thing had value. Why would someone want some intangible money? Who's it issued by? These were, concepts that, take people years to digest and to come to the full realization. But if you spent a lot of time in World of Warcraft, it was not a big, you were used to trading dollars for gold in a game. And so that's where, call it, most of crypto's growth came from in 2012 and 13 and 14. That's where most of the user growth came from, because it wasn't a major learning curve. I mean, this is a partial list, but yeah, chairman of the Bitcoin Foundation. I was chairman of Mastercoin. We invented the ICO, which the whole idea there is to disrupt capital formation. Historically, if you were an entrepreneur here, or in Latin America, or in Africa, you didn't have access to capital. Capital was available just in the hubs like Sand Hill Road. Between the Jobs Act, crowdfunding, ICOs, it's done a great job in the democratization of capital available to entrepreneurs, innovators. Historically, the likelihood of your idea ever having a chance depended upon where you were born and where you had access to. One of the amazing things about, back to like what an incredible time to be alive, if you have a great idea, you have a shot almost anywhere in the world. And so, That's an interesting one. Blockchain Capital was the venture fund that I set up. The first venture fund in the industry, went on to be one of the most successful venture firms of all time. We funded many of the first companies. It's on Fund 6 now. Also for Fund 3, did BCAP, which was the first security token, where I said that, you know, all stocks and bonds are eventually going to settle with this technology or another technology like it. You know, we're going to move towards a T0, Tether, as I mentioned, Block One, the first 2 NFT platforms. I mean, a lot of this stuff started actually the first crypto bank in the world here in Puerto Rico back in 2014. Trust is eroding in the pillars that basically hold civilization in place. People are losing faith and trust in their media. You know, in pretty much all the institutions are being challenged with the erosion of trust. And if trust erodes far enough, the incredible world that we live in right now that is continually getting better could change. And it could turn bad fast. And trust is one of those things that takes a long time to build up, and it can be lost in a moment, as we know. And so that's the big question is, how do we restore trust? I don't have the answer to that other than at the individual level. How do you create trust, right? Where does trust come from? It comes from acting with integrity, honoring your word. I mean, it's basic stuff that we all know. And then as an institution, similarly, you know, I don't want to take this into a conversation that's, you know, putting down anything. But that's the basics of it, you know, trust. And how do we ensure that we continue to have it? Obviously, this is a technology for doing that. So my focus these days is principally in running around the world, talking to world leaders about innovation. And so I took a role in the UN, working on a permanent mission called OIJ, which is Spain, Portugal, Dominican Republic, and every country in Latin America. And the focus there is in youth and leadership and development. And so that is kind of where I have a lot of conversations going on, you know, near here. And in that process, set up our own organization, which is called unicorn.org, which is the United Council of Rising Nations, which is focusing exclusively on innovation as a tool for transformation. The idea is that every startup, you know, is hoping to become a unicorn with that incredible success, and that innovation is a tool for transformation for nations too. And that if nations embrace innovation, they can be unicorns too. And so that's a big part of what we do there, is working with about 50 countries right now. Africa is really what's been turning online for 2024. But we were involved with President Bukele, led the first delegation into El Salvador. Since COVID had began, we brought a team of 36 of us, 35 others down, multiple vendors around every aspect of the law that they wanted to implement for the Bitcoin law. That team of entrepreneurs and innovators accomplished that in, I think, under 85 days. But it's not just in the area of crypto. I mean, we look at all the things that a nation needs, basically start with their problems, and then find the amazing innovators. I mean, again, this is the part that brings me so much hope, is that we have got new tools, you know, such tools for incredible positive impact that, you know, you just have to connect the dots and hook governments up with the things that they need. And it turns out most of them are looking. You know, it's historically it's your major consulting firms that work with your Fortune 2000s, and they're really only focused on the largest markets in the world. What I found in all the developing world is nobody really pays attention to them because they're not the biggest markets, and my generation doesn't care about what the biggest market opportunity is, but we tend to care about where the biggest impact is. You know, money is not a motivator for me, it's the byproduct of success. You know, I'm motivated by where I can be successful in making a positive impact. The financial success comes as a byproduct of doing anything well. Most things, if it has any scale. You don't need to make money your goal. Money comes naturally if you're doing great work. You know, I think that should be sustainable in all the things. And so, I think most of this kind of covers it, but I'm just going to skip over that because it's not really needed. Obviously, hodgepodge of slides from a bunch of different things.
Is that you in a suit?
Yes, I wear suits. I wear suits whenever I'm in kind of government environments. Though, it's not my preferred uniform. You know, this is one of those mixed situations where we're here with public companies and we're here with private companies and we're here with entrepreneurs. And so if I have to pick a uniform, I pick my more entrepreneurial one today. Which is on Wednesdays green. I color coordinate so I know what to wear every day. Wednesdays are green day. Probably have to add some music to that one too. Actually, yeah, it's surprising what you have to wear. If I'm not wearing a suit with governments, trust is a problem. If I'm wearing a suit with entrepreneurs, trust is a problem. Which is where I think that maybe if I give myself a title these days, I'm a translator in that environment. I translate between the innovators and the bureaucrats and help with the language that allows them to work together. I think I'm going to stop just on Puerto Rico for a moment. So I started coming down here when I was 18. And then came down here to start a bank. I was studying federally chartered banks, state chartered banks, credit unions in 2013 because we had a major systemic risk to the entire crypto industry, which is that banks didn't want to bank most startups. Not for the reasons that the industry thought. They thought that banks were threatened by, crypto companies. It's that the crypto companies didn't generate enough revenue to be worth the compliance issues that they presented. It wasn't David versus Goliath. It was, you're not worth very much and you're a headache. And so you needed someone that was going to, build a boutique business effectively catering to an emerging market. And that's what brought me down here originally, was to set that up. And in that process, I got reacquainted with an island that I really enjoyed visiting in my youth. And it was when Hurricane Maria hit that I moved down here. Because I kind of won the game of life enough to the point that, for me, it was about where can I make the biggest impact. And this was the place that just stood out to me in terms of where I wanted to do it, for a lot of reasons. One is, you're right, in the center of kind of the Caribbean. You're less than 3 hours from Florida. You can shoot to Colombia with these. It's a great geographic location. I'm originally from Minnesota. The weather's good. I want to live in warm places. I love being near the ocean. The culture is incredible. I mean, talk about a place culturally that fights way above its weight class. I don't know if you know this, but like the most viewed video on YouTube for years was Despacito, which was shot in Factoria in Viejo San Juan and down in La Perla. It did get usurped by Baby Shark. And for any parent, you'll know why. It's hard to beat the number of plays per. But it's an incredible place, and there's so much that can be done from an economic development perspective. Like I kind of look at things from three sort of metrics: quality of life, opportunity, and potential for impact. And I don't know of anywhere in the world that checks those three boxes at a higher number collectively. Individually, there's places where you can make a bigger impact, have a higher quality of life, and have more opportunity, but the three combined scores as high as anywhere I know. And so for me, in terms of what motivates me, I love this place. I think that there's a big trend starting. I don't know if you're paying attention to the CHIPS Act and what's going on with semiconductors and manufacturing and bringing jobs back. But in the macro trend, manufacturing has left the country over the last few decades. You may not know this, but Puerto Rico was the main place for biopharmaceutical production, not just in the United States, but pretty much the world for a little while. And that left back in the 90s, and there's some big trends around bringing manufacturing jobs and things back to the States. And I think that Puerto Rico is really well positioned for some of that. I mean, it could be the next Taiwan when you start thinking about electronics and electronic manufacturing. It's happening right now. The only question is it going to be Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, or Puerto Rico? And it's not going to be any one of those places exclusively. It'll be a few places. That's happening right now. Tens of billions of dollars being issued if you know how to ask. Which is something I do here in Puerto Rico, but I'm going to get into this further. But the business is here, and this is a certification business at its core. And obviously, as a certification business, there's an opportunity to use technology to track certificate of authenticity. And so, well, I guess you're hearing that I'm doing something in this area first. But back to supply chains and Made in America. Made in the USA, which I think is going to be probably something part of this year's political season too. At least we'll get something new. If not the players, the concepts and ideas. This is another big one for Puerto Rico, which is space. There's a lot of potential here. If you think back to what the Navy did, Roosevelt Roads was first built in 1943, and if you know anything about space, I'm a GP in Space Fund 1 and Space Fund 2, which was the first space fund. I'm in a lot of industries. And for space and space programs, certainly for launching, not that this is a good place yet for vertical, though the key to space programs is you need to be as close to the equator as you can be, and as far east as possible for launching things. Meaning that anywhere in the US, Puerto Rico is the #1 place as we think about where space is going. It's as well positioned as anywhere in the US as a territory. The better places, which are going to be a little harder to finance, are Panama and Ecuador. But you know, this is in the Americas long term where the greatest potential for space stuff works. Currently it's Texas and Florida. Though the cost is cheaper the closer you are to the equator.
Is that why Elon's plane was here a couple weeks ago?
I think it's public why Elon was here, which wasn't space. That was rolling out some of the energy infrastructure wishes he had. Following Hurricane Maria, Elon put forth, he made some offers to bring energy infrastructure. And so some of the things that he's been working on for 6 years here are finally happening.
The rotation of the Earth accelerates the launch, less fuel will get into space.
Yeah, it costs more money to fly the further you are from the equator. It's cheaper the closer you get here. And eventually, I think even NASA published that eventually the space elevator is built, it would be from Roosevelt Roads. But that's using graphene nanotubes, things that don't exist yet. But they might in 20 years. Largest coconut farm here in Puerto Rico, and that happened because when he was first building this company, he'd come to me and said, "Brock, I need you as my partner." I said, "You don't fit into my investment mandate." He's like, "But I need you as my partner." I'm like, "You don't fit in my investment mandate." I have to have some limitations to what I do, otherwise I'll be spread so thin that I'm kind of everywhere. And I can't do that yet. And so he's like, what do I got to do? What do I got to do? I said, well, actually, I'll invest in anything if it's in Puerto Rico. And he's like, so what do I got to do? I go, well, we got to figure out a Puerto Rico angle for you. And then I made him as a condition he had to agree to assist Puerto Rico in its coconut water development, which he did. It wasn't in the contract, it was on a handshake. And he followed through on his promise. Now, he can give you updates on this, but if you haven't had Coco Love, I'm assuming you have.
I met with him today. It's awesome.
But if you haven't had Coco Love,
It's a good product.
And it's tequila too.
yeah, like,
It's the most delicious coconut water by far.
I've started, and I've been involved in the creation of hundreds and hundreds of companies. We often have high aspirational goals of making great things, and often we are disappointed. This is one of those examples of wow. Like, it's a perfect 10. I mean, it's the best coconut water I've ever had, and I'm not saying that because it's one of my portfolio companies. It just is that good. And highly recommend giving it a try. But, you know, back to like products, I want to talk about a company here in Puerto Rico for anybody that invests. Does anyone invest in Puerto Rican startups here?
Yeah.
I want to talk about Produce. This is the coolest company that I'm aware of in Puerto Rico for driving resiliency and food security. One of the problems you have is, you know, 85% of the food here is imported. We talked a little bit about sugarcane and the impact that had on the agricultural industry going back. And if you go to any of the grocery stores here, even Fresh Mart, you're going to find very little product that's local. And that's not anyone's fault. You know, dealing with logistics of small farms and things, it's a headache. It's a lot easier to, you know, buy things simply and have a big order and have it delivered. But what they did is great. So the founders, Crystal and Francisco, Francisco had another company that he was a part of called Uva. Uva was like your Uber Eats, your local version of the company, and they were able to build the applications for basically food delivery. And what they did with this company is they went to small farms, 400 of them on the island, and basically they do direct delivery through warehousing. So you get your groceries from Puerto Rican suppliers, and it cuts out basically the grocery stores. And so I think when you buy product from a Whole Foods or any of these places that you might know, typically I think the farmer is getting around 18% probably of revenue. Does that sound about right? You know this stuff. I think it's roughly there. I think with Produce, my data might be out, they're getting about 50% of sales. There might be some fees and other things that get cut into that. But, you know, if you want to see agriculture improve, you got to first of all, you have to have distribution. If you're a local Puerto Rican farmer, very hard to sell your product anywhere. Without distribution, it's hard to keep a business afloat or a farm running and keep it going. So anything that drives distribution is valuable. Anything that puts more money into the hands of those businesses that you're trying to drive distribution to, great. So I love this company. And if you live here, how many people live here locally? Do you have this app?
Yes.
If you don't, go into the App Store, download it. It's produce with an exclamation point at the end. Like this is, you're going to be so happy with the product selection that you have and the idea that you're actually helping the overall ecosystem of food security on the island. And if you're investors, I don't know if they're currently raising money right now, but I would definitely recommend reaching out to the company. I'm just a huge fan, and I try to order everything from them. We have do we have an event at Lighthouse? I think a bunch of you are coming to the monastery tonight, but Lighthouse was the first NFT gallery in the world. We're trying to help people understand what NFTs are by using a gallery so that you can actually experience NFTs with digital canvases. I don't know if there's an event there for this week, but we do events there, and definitely come check it out if you haven't already. The digital canvases and the screens that we have there from WHIM, W-H-I-M. If anyone's interested in how like this new form factor as we move from like iPads and tablets to digital canvases, they're bespoke products. You can't just stick a TV on a wall and rotate it. It'll break. And so there's a new, basically, industry of digital canvases emerging. We're huge fans of WHIM. There's no public way to invest in this stuff yet. Pluto.com. Not saying anything really about that right now, but if you want to register, it's another project I'm working on. I don't know, you know, some of us are trying to get to the moon, some of us are trying to get to Mars. I'm trying to take us to Pluto and beyond to see the stars. Eric, we've got Eric in the house, Flashy Cash, in from Portugal. I'm doing a bunch of stuff in Portugal, and so we've got creative agency and development over there. And Eric flew in, who we've been working on, we've been together since GoCoin. We started working together over a decade ago. Payments and other things. But Flashy Cash is here. Are you giving a speech?
Yeah, tomorrow at 3.
Tomorrow at 3 p.m. So if you're interested in payments infrastructure, crypto-related things, Eric is here. Actually, Maria, if you want to invite the Produce team over, it might be a good idea. Let them know I gave them a big shout out, and there might be people interested in talking to them. Just trying to get us through
all your companies, Brock, are tomorrow from 1 to 4.
Okay. Persist Ventures is here. Venture Studio, AI, 8 new products, 8 companies that are, you know, emerging out of that Venture Studio AI projects. We've got Jackson here, who's also speaking sometime tomorrow in that group. 2:30, actually the only one that's got a time on it. Mystic Ventures, Jeremy and Mac are not here, but this is a fund focused on consciousness and mental health and psychedelics. Probably the most active fund in that space. I think we've got like 25 probably portfolio companies. And so if you're interested in that, also if you're interested in space, on Space Fund, if you're interested in Consciousness Mystic, we're probably announcing our longevity fund here soon, but I do a lot of vertical sector-focused fund work. As an LP, I don't like generalists. I want to be able to pick the categories of things that I'm investing in, and I want specialists where it's become their domain, you know, to be great. Generally, you know, there's, but I do love science. And the work there, it's like, you know, I do like laboratories. Mental health, I can get into this. This is Chris Valentine here? Chris is here. This is a project that a local partner here in Puerto Rico, Chris, and a friend that's been here for 15 years or so, led hospitals out of the HEMA bankruptcy. And so HOPE is Puerto Rican hospitals, hospital network, goals of fixing healthcare, and some of that is in sort of radiology, right? The best medicine is preventative medicine. That starts with health. Like, real wealth is health. But the other part of it is catching it early. And I don't want to, you know, it's actually, there's some serious health care problems here in Puerto Rico, diabetes, all sorts of stuff. And healthcare is an area where if you have any interest in hospitals and work of that nature, Chris is here and can talk to you. I think that's generally it. I'm just glad to be here. I want to give a big shout out to Chris Miglino and the entire Strax team.